We are so excited to be starting the 2023 AACC Business Summit. I'd like to start by welcoming some distinguished guests. Kelvin Eng, he's the Deputy Director of the Government of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Yep. Thank you. And Chulipote Isarankura, who is the Minister and Deputy Chief of Mission. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. And also the innovators of our business world here and abroad, thank you for being here. My name is Nadia Ewing. I am a proud AACC board member and a marketing and communications consultant for Dominion Energy. And I am proud to be your MC for the day. So if you see me wandering around, you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So our program today, as you know, it's jam-packed. We've got a lot going on. We've got panels, breakout sessions, lots of networking to do. So without further ado, I would like to get started by introducing some of our introductory speakers. And I'm going to start with Timothy Gillis this morning. He's the managing partner here at KPMG. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you, Nadia. It's so good to see you here today. I'm delighted, absolutely excited to welcome you to our offices. We moved here about 6 months before COVID hit. So the offices still feel new, they act new, and sometimes we have new problems in the office still because we are still becoming acclimated to these offices. But we do love it here. It's very comfortable for us. And the borough, while we were out during COVID, the borough, the surrounding area around us here developed so wonderfully so that when we came back, we were able to have so many more options for eating and after work drinks and even housing, as you can tell. The housing market around here has been very helpful, and all of this strip between 123 and out to the toll road, all that strip is designed for mixed use and a lot of mixed levels of housing. So even low-income housing is coming in. I think it's going to be a wonderful area. It's a good sign of what Tyson's is growing up to be like. And a lot of that comes about in part because of great work by groups like the Chamber of Commerce and the Asian American Chamber of Commerce as well. So I'm really delighted to welcome you here today. I've looked at your agenda. It's a fantastic setup. I won't get in the way of any further speakers, but you've got a terrific day ahead of you. Thank you so much for coming to our offices today, and thank you to Christopher and to Cindy and others for inviting me to come in. Nadia, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tim, for hosting us today. Our next speaker is Laura Belden. She is our Summit Chair, a fellow AACC board member, and Senior Vice President at Bank of America Private Bank. Not only is she a prominent figure within AACC, but she's also passionate about travel, reading, making new friends, and of course, trying all kinds of interesting cuisines. Laura, I'm very excited to introduce you as our Summit Chair this year.
For coming and joining us the 14th Asian American Chamber Business Summit Expo. AACC's mission is encourage, facilitate, and support the economic growth of the DC area by building bridges and serving a resource for our API community. I hope today's program can serve that purpose. And I'm so grateful for the wonderful speakers and thankful for a great team to put this together. So I hope you enjoy today's program. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you, Laura. And last but certainly not least, our proud and fearless AACC President, Cindy Shao. Will you come up here and say a few words for us this morning?
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Laura, for your wonderful leadership. We successfully converted Laura to be our kind of full-time volunteer for the chamber. That's how chamber works. We have a small staff. We have so many events, but we have dedicated board members, committee members, also our dear members and partners like KPMG and many other of our corporate sponsors are here with us. And thank you so much for your support. So good morning. Warm welcome everyone to the Asian American Business Summit. It's a great honor to have each of you here today representing the diverse Asian business community and also all our partners from the government sectors, corporations, nonprofit world, and some of also individuals. We also have a special guest today, the scholar, King Scholar from Thailand. That's our pipeline for future generation. So the summit is a testimony to the remarkable achievements and contributions made by Asian American businesses in the economic landscape of our nation. Your resilience, innovation, and the commitment have not only fueled economic growth, but have also created opportunities for countless individuals. Our gathering today is more than just an event. It's a platform for collaboration, knowledge exchange, and strategic networking. We have curated a program featuring renowned speakers, thought-provoking panel discussions, and ample networking opportunities that will empower you to set new standards and reach greater milestones. We encourage everyone to actively engage, seek new partnerships, share your insights, and explore the endless possibilities that lies ahead. Together, we can shape the trajectory of Asian American businesses and continue to make a significant impact. So I extend my deepest gratitude for your presence, and I'm confident that together we will make this summit an outstanding success. Enjoy the event and let us collaboratively pave the way for a bright future in the realms of the Asian American business excellence. And thank you so much for each of you for being with us today. Have a fantastic day. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity also introducing Jacqueline Marmol, the representative from Senator Mark Warner's office.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jackie Marmol. I'm the outreach representative for Senator Mark Warner. I just want to give a very special thank you to Cindy for always keeping us apprised of everything that the Chamber is doing. The last event I was at was in Lovettsville for Asian Fest, and I'm here on behalf of Senator Warner to present a letter to the Chamber. Dear friends, I'm pleased to extend warm greetings to all who are gathered through the Asian American Chamber of Commerce's 14th Annual Asian American Business Summit. This event provides an important opportunity for Asian American business owners to further their professional development, make new connections with one another, and discuss further business trends. Networking and establishing relationships with fellow attendees, representatives from government agencies, and speakers will create opportunities for collaboration and provide resources for your companies. Each of you play a critical role in ensuring that Virginia's economy is strong. You create new jobs, provide needed goods and services, and contribute so much to your communities. I commend you for your service and look forward to all that you will accomplish in the year ahead. I send my best wishes for an informative and successful event. Sincerely, Senator Mark R. Warner. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that. That was very special. So I'd also like to take a brief moment to just thank all of our sponsors today: Verizon, Midori, Capital Bank, Dominion Energy, PNC, and Google for their commitment and their generosity year over year. And can we give a little round of applause for Mario Acosta Velez? He's the Vice President of Local Engagement and Corporate Social Responsibility for Verizon, and Trong Bui, a fellow AACC board member and the President and CEO of Vidori. Thank you both for your generosity and commitment this morning. At At this time, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and introduce our first keynote speaker. They provide invaluable insights, as you know, into our cultural and business landscapes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim, standing in for Trong, and we're with Barry, one of the sponsors here. And we're just excited to be a part of the Asian Chamber Summit this year. We've been a member of the Chamber for a few years now and participating, and we think that what the Chamber brings to both the business community and also the diversity of work is very important. So we're excited to be here. We have more information set up at our exhibit booth today, and we'd love to have a chance to speak with you all.
Thanks so much. We appreciate that. Thank you, Tim. So as we wait for Larry, I'd like to introduce our second keynote speaker for the morning, Candy Yamaguchi. She's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for U.S. Field, Global Markets, and International Trade for the U.S. Department of Commerce. Candy, can I welcome you to the podium?
Well, good morning, everyone. Trying to see everyone still down on this side, too. It is really an honor to be part of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce's 14th Annual Asian American Business Summit. And today's conference celebrates the long-standing legacy that businesses create for our communities. And being here today is very meaningful for me, given my personal and work background. My mother, Rose, opened a business in Seattle over 45 years ago. I know firsthand the hardships our businesses and communities face and what a critical role government plays in serving others. My mother opened her business during a time when loans couldn't be easily accessed, and she faced not only discrimination based on gender, but on race. And she overcame many challenges. And I learned about having a strong work ethic and that the American dream was possible. So working at the Department of Commerce allows me to help other businesses fulfill their American dream. And this is why this work is so important. In my role at the Department of Commerce with the U.S. Commercial Service, I oversee our country's domestic operations. We have over 100 offices across the country, connecting businesses to every embassy and consulate in the world. And I just take a pause. We're connecting, and in your backyard, our offices, connecting your businesses to the world. So I want to make sure you all leave knowing you have that resource. So our mission is to help businesses of all sizes. Help them access international opportunities, help them increase exports, and help them create jobs. Help them create jobs. So working with organizations like the Asian American Chamber of Commerce is critical to expanding our nation's exports. And together, through our strategic partnership that we signed last year, we have joined forces. One of the reasons why I'm here today, to support businesses, export, and expand. So the U.S. Commercial Service has increased its presence at this summit. And I just put a pause on that, and I want to call out one of our team members, April, right in the front row. And I hope you have a chance to meet her, she'll be here today, and to check out one of the panels that she'll be speaking on. She's here to help businesses like you. And she also heads our Northern Virginia U.S. Commercial Service Office. And what I just mentioned is we have over 100 offices across the country, very similar to the role that April has. So If you know of other businesses in other cities, please make them aware. So our partnership with the Asian American Chamber of Commerce has led to many benefits supporting the community. And I just wanted to call out 2 of them, but there are many more. Wanted to highlight, for example, together, we organized 2 trade and investment webinars to present export tools and select USA services for companies to evaluate investment locations. We also helped to make it easier to establish and grow business operations in the US market. And in 2022, we teamed up with the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Philadelphia AACC, and the Port of Philadelphia to connect businesses to resources to help them reach global markets. Those are just 2 examples of many things we have collaborated on, including the summit today. Our shared commitment is building a more prosperous and inclusive economy, and a more equitable economy. A core priority of the Biden-Harris administration and the US Department of Commerce is equity. It is the backbone of our mission. It is one of the reasons why I'm here today. Equity underpins everything that we do as we reimagine how trade and commerce can serve all Americans. And equity is just not the right policy, it is a just policy. And it makes good economic and business sense. We know our economy cannot reach its full potential unless economic opportunity is fully shared. And we have a duty to ensure that the benefits of trade are broadly felt. And this means expanding opportunities for businesses from underserved communities, including businesses in rural areas, as well as minority, women, LGBTQI+, and veteran-owned businesses. We know the US is the world's largest economy, and it is blessed with one of the most diverse populations in the world. And this diversity is a source of innovation, creativity, and strength. So I want to touch on a few things why you may be interested in our work in this area. Not only are we committed to equity, we launched a global diversity export initiative to help diverse businesses in underserved communities increase their export sales. And this is all about opening up opportunity for you. There's a few things I want you to take away from this. It'd be our Global Diversity Export Initiative and all of the resources that we're trying to bring to you. This initiative, since launch, has signed over 11 strategic partners. And we are working together with our partners to reach you. To reach you and share our export resources, programs, and services. And we wanted you to know about our export assistance centers. And I just pointed out April, who works as a director in one of our export assistance centers. I call this out because I've traveled throughout the country. In about 2.5 months, I think I was in over 20 cities, meeting with chambers across the country. And I was surprised how many knew or didn't know about our export assistance centers. So I always want to take a pause to underscore our centers, because it's a resource in your backyard. Another takeaway I want to share is next year, we will host the largest government trade mission, which I like to call for the business community a business development forum. And it is known as Trade Winds. Trade Winds. And it will take place from May 9th to the 17th next year, with the main forum in Istanbul, Turkey, with spin-off stops in Italy, Romania, Denmark, Poland, and Kazakhstan. I just place a pause on that because if you are a business and you are looking to do business in one of those stops, I just wanted you to be able to capture that. If you didn't know about this event, over 1,000 businesses have participated in the past, and we anticipate 400 business-to-business engagements will occur at this event, and nearly 600 U.S. commercial diplomat counseling sessions for U.S. companies will take place. It is a great opportunity for businesses, and it sells out, and people can't get in. One thing I wanted to highlight, I don't want to get in trouble from April for going off my remarks, but in my second week on this job, I was sent out to TradeWinds. It was in Bangkok last year. Okay. And I like sharing this story because I think it's helpful to visualize what this event is. Because like my mother's business, we get a lot of flyers, we hear about a lot of events, and we couldn't quite tell the difference between them, right? So I like painting this picture of what this event is. So you as a business are able to visualize it. So many of you may go do shopping at, a Costco, or Virginia, so I should mention, since it's down the street, a Sam's Club, or a large, just imagine a warehouse. Imagine the table in front of you, and rows of those tables in a building warehouse of that size, okay? Now imagine a embassy personnel and our team at the table with businesses lined up, table after table in a location of this size. What I witnessed is I sat in on one of our companies in the US, and I said, we just came off this summer where you probably had hot dogs, hamburgers, and put condiments on your food, and it was an unnamed company, which you're probably very familiar. I witnessed them in 30 minutes go into 3 markets. So I want to emphasize this and explain my personal experience, what I experienced and saw for myself at this event, because a lot of times I know businesses, you're busy. And I think it's helpful to understand when we want to share a resource or an opportunity with you as well. So this is TradeWinds. It's coming up May 9th, and the registration has opened for it as well. And it sells out every time, and I really recommend that you register for this event. So similar to that resource, I really encourage you to connect with April. Check out all of our resources while she is here, and I very much look forward to continuing our partnership and working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. So forgive me for running late this morning. I was trying to get from downtown DC and took a little bit longer than I thought, but I thank you for allowing me briefly to speak. I want to obviously get to the panel because they have even more important things to speak to you about. But since I do have the mic for a few moments, I just wanted to reiterate, some of you have heard me speak before. I've always enjoyed coming to these events. I definitely want to thank Cindy Shao for inviting me and being such an energetic person. Every time I see Cindy, she's like, you gotta come, Larry, you gotta come. How many people in the room have worked with the SBA in some capacity? Good. How many people in the room have worked with SBA vis-a-vis a loan product? Loan? How many people in government contracting? How many people worked with one of our resource partners, SCORE, Women's Business Center, Small Business Development Center? That's less. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on today. So we do 3 basic things with the SBA, and those are access to capital, government contracting, counseling, and mentoring. Call them the 3 C's. Most of the people in here, at least a good number of you, know that the SBA does loans and capital. For those who don't know, we do not do direct loans. What we do is we incentivize borrowers, lenders, to provide money. So that means that we say to a bank or a lending institution, if you provide this 7(a) loan, this 504 loan, we will pay you back if that business goes under, if that business fails to meet their financial obligations under the loan. That's capital. Government contracting, as many of you know, we do the 8A program, we do veterans, service-disabled veterans, women-owned small businesses, etc. Those are certification programs for the most part, and beyond those certification programs, what we say to the federal government is, of the $700 billion that you spend on government, on federal contracts, a percentage, a large percentage, 23 going up to 25% of that needs to go to small businesses. So we're advocating on the behalf of small businesses to make sure that they get a bite at that apple, and it doesn't all go to the bigs. But the most important thing that I believe that we do, and those are very significant dollars that we're talking about there, hundreds of billions of dollars. But the most important thing that I believe that we do is prepare you for those opportunities and prepare you to grow, to expand, and to start your small businesses. And that's through our free and low-cost mentoring programs, our counseling programs. They are all throughout the country. I represent the district director of Washington Metropolitan. That's the DMV. That's the Maryland counties of Prince George's and Montgomery, DC, and the Northern Virginia counties. But we have 68 district offices throughout the country. And each one of those has a network of what we call resource partners. And so if you haven't taken advantage of that, that is an opportunity for you to not have to recreate the wheel. That's an opportunity for you to talk to someone who knows about finance, who knows about government contracting, who knows how to start a business, who knows when to sell your business, who knows how to advise you on things like, should I get a partner? I'm having difficulty getting capital. I'm a startup. Should I get someone? Should I sell some equity? Some people are like, "We'll never sell equity in your business because you're giving up money." Others might say, half of zero is zero. So if someone is willing to invest, if someone is willing to finance you, maybe that's a good idea. They don't have Shark Tank on television for no reason. But those are the types of things that those resource partners can do for you. Because I don't have a lot of time, what I'm going to do now is just, once again, reiterate who those resource partners are and how you can get in touch with them. One of those resource partners are our small business development centers. Two, they are the women's business centers. We now have a women's business center in every state in the union. That is a new thing under this recent administration. They are working under this, hopefully, knock on wood, we get a new appropriations so that we can expand not only the number of women's business centers, but the offerings of those women's business centers. We also have SCORE, which used to stand for something, retired executives. Doesn't stand for that anymore because they're not all retired. These are people that have been in the trenches, CFOs, been in the C-suites, have run businesses, and are now offering free of charge their expertise to help you. So if you are a baker and you want to talk to someone who has actually been in the business, maybe worked for some huge corporation or just ran their own business, and you want to talk to them about when do I do this? When do I buy this machinery? When do I move into a brick and mortar? That's the type of offerings that we have, and those are the types of things that we can offer you. How do you get in touch with them? Last thing. So, if you have not taken advantage of that, and if this sounds interesting to you, you have two options. One, you can just come up and talk to me after this, because I'm going to be here for a while, and I will explain this to you again. But if you go to SBA.gov on your phone or your laptop, just write this down, SBA.gov, click on local assistance, it's at the top of the page. If you're looking at your phone, click on the three little lines at the top, and there'll be a drop down. Hit local assistance, put in your zip code, and you will find out all the resources within 50 miles of where you are located. Put in your business address, put in your home address, whichever zip code you want to put in, and it's within 50 miles of that, you will find out all the resources in that time. The last thing I'll say about that is, as with any type of counseling or advice or what have you, you have to find those resources that fit you. So if you go to one of the things, you're like, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. Let's try the other one. It's like a doctor. Maybe the doctor isn't the one for you, or the dentist, or the therapist. Lord knows we all need that for time. Find the one that fits you. Find the resource partner that fits you. Find the counselor that fits you. One last thing. Okay, I keep saying that, but I actually get closer, so this is the last thing. If you are a veteran in the room, how many veterans do we have in the room? If you are a veteran in the room, we also have veteran business opportunity centers, which are focused specifically on veterans and the needs of veterans. Sometimes veterans think about things, they approach business, they are processing these things from their former military perspective, and we have an entire center at the University of Maryland, which is the first one we have in the capital region, in this region, specifically for veterans. So thank you so much for the time. Thank you for allowing me to speak, even though I was running a few minutes late, and I will be here for a while after the panel. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to find me. Thank you.
Our moderator is Laura Belden. She's an AACC board member and the Senior Vice President at Bank of America Private Bank. Our panelists are Bill Keller. He's the Managing Director at Bank of America Private Bank, and Keith Waters, the Assistant Director for the Center for Regional Analysis and the Stephen S. Fuller Institute at George Mason University. Thank you all so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you. There we go. I'm so excited for this first panel, Economic Outlook. I know a lot of you are interested in finding out what's going on in the world, what's going on in the U.S., and also what is going on in the D.C. and the area, and the housing market, the job, labor market. And I'm going to turn it into Bill and Keith to talk about the economy in the current time. And I know that they don't want me to introduce them as like this serious economist. And when I was asking Keith, he said, just tell them I'm a handsome guy. So,
that's all you need to remember.
So I actually got two handsome panelists here. So I'm going to turn it to Bill. Let Bill start with the event.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks all for joining us. We're going to divide and conquer today. So I'm going to take the macro, what's happening at the national level, what we're seeing trends happen, even touching out internationally, some big trends out there. Then Keith is going to pull in what's happening in the local region. We both love questions, so feel free to ask questions at any time. In fact, I'm going to, Larry's sneaking out now, but he actually made you raise your hands, right? I'm going to ask the same. It's always good to get a feel for what's on folks' mind. So right now, just a real simple question. Is the economy doing well, or is the economy struggling? So I'm going to ask to be optimistic first thing. Show of hands, who believes the economy is currently doing well? And if you don't put your hands up, it means you all think it's doing poorly. So a little less than probably about a third is optimistic, feels like things are going well. And 6 months ago, we would have said that would be the answer today. Yesterday morning, we received third quarter gross domestic product numbers. 6 months ago, all the smart guys on Wall Street said it is going to be zero. Really a bad time, this point in the economy. Yet the data came out yesterday and was anything but negative. It was up 4.9%, showing that the economy is doing really, really well. Yet a lot of us feel like it's doing poorly. So good versus bad is tough to understand. What we're struggling with today is easy versus hard. Why is it so hard today to understand what's going on? Now I want to ask the next question is, show of hands, who thinks 6 months from now things will be worse than they are today? So we're going to take the negative side, since most of you are negative. Who thinks it's going to be negative? Like we could be in a recession 6 months from now. All right, see, now I'm thinking I just don't have a lot of hand raisers, because that means we're optimistic about the future. I'm going to share with you 4 things that I think the economy is struggling with today and will be struggling with for the next decade. And as business owners, this is really important for all of you to think about as you run your business. So the first big trend that we're seeing today is energy policy is really messed up. That's a technical term. So think about our energy policy 2 or 3 years ago. We were going from brown energy, oil-based energy, to green energy moving forward. Am I? So, so first one is lack of energy policy. Right, the transition from brown energy to green energy was natural gas. A fellow named Vladimir Putin kind of messed up that transition when he invaded Europe, or invaded Ukraine. And now we're asking, how do we deal with energy today? There's no clear, real guidance out there what's going to happen, and weird things are happening. Anyone want to hazard a guess on what the best performing energy price was? Energy commodity, oil, things like that. Anyone want to guess? Over the last year and a half? It's been coal. Coal 18 months ago was trading about $93 a ton. Today it's at $240 a ton. Coal, which is a dead commodity, which we're no longer supposed to use, all of a sudden became really, really in demand. And that shows the volatility that we're going to have going forward. We know also today that friends, folks who are not necessarily our friends, happen to have a lot of energy stored in their ground. And so they have sway over us right now, and that's going to be challenging. We know the Saudis are not real happy with us today. The Saudis are also friends with the Russians, who are clearly not happy with us. We've got an election coming up. They like to play games with the price of oil during election cycles, and so expect some interesting couple of months coming up. The idea too of going from brown energy to green energy, understand that your Tesla is an incredibly challenging vehicle to build because the battery inside of it needs about 20 rare earth minerals. And each of those minerals tend to come from only 1 or 2 countries. And we now need to be having really good relations with each of those countries. Much harder than before with a combustion engine where you just needed gasoline. Didn't care where it come from, we happen to have a lot of it. So we could be a little more fluid with our policies. Today that's going to be a lot harder. So with lack of clear policy, you're going to see price volatility. When you see price volatility, it's going to be pushing prices around, which is inflationary. The second piece that we're dealing with is one, kind of on the back end of this, is we no longer trust our neighbors, okay? If you think about the fall of the Cold War, where we went from a polarized world, you're either with us or you're with the Soviet Union. That ended in 1991, and we all said what we really cares about most today is the bottom line. And when we looked to the bottom line and said that's what we care about, we started to offshore businesses around the globe. And we maximized profits and we minimized prices. And so we've just come from through a period of about 30 years where we've seen prices fall and fall and fall. But now we know we're back to this rapidly polarizing world, right? There's the Western world and there's the Eastern world. I was listening to CNBC this morning, and they use terms like axis of evil, right? Where they're starting to say with us or against us. When that happens, you have to say the bottom line is no longer the priority that I have. I need to have security as well, right? We saw lack of security during COVID when supply chains broke, because we're reliant on somebody who couldn't get us what we wanted. That is now going to be a bigger priority, and we're seeing more businesses change how they act, whether it's friendshoring, whether it's onshoring, nearshoring, call it what you want. When you start moving things around that were put in place for maximization of profits, you're going to have a reduction in profits and an increase in price. So that's the second big challenge out there. And as far as the wars are going, when you start building militaries, it is like an insurance policy. I am going to buy a tank and hope I put that tank on the shelf and I never use it, right? It's kind of like my homeowner's insurance. I pray I never have to make a claim. Right now, we all think we need more tanks on the shelf. And that is money that could be used to build a bridge, is now building a tank that we hope we never really need. So lack of security today, or this lack of friendship around the globe, is the second big inflationary piece. Third, and I'll get to you, I promise. I promise, Keith. No, that's all right. Yeah, the third item is the fact that we're just running out of workers, right? As the population changes, we're finding workers in more and more demand, and you're seeing strikes pop up all over the place, and you're seeing big raises through those strikes, and you're seeing still lots of help wanted ads. 2018 was the first time we saw more job openings than we had job seekers, and that's only been magnified through COVID to today, where we still have a big disconnect. It's happening partly because the population is aging. And we know as this baby boom generation hits retirement, a couple things happen. They retire and they live longer. So you have a big part of the population that has exited the workforce but still drawing on the workforce. You see this in one number. It's called labor force participation rate. Labor force participation rate is a simple metric. Are you over the age of 18? And are you working or trying to find a job? If yes, you're in the metric. If no, you're not. We saw that number in the 50s, about 58%. As women entered the workforce, that number jumped all the way up to about 69% in 2000. Today it's hovering just below 63%, and the expectation is it is going to continue to fall as retirees leave the workforce and live longer. You're going to always be fighting for labor. And it's not just here in the US, it's the same in Europe. You think about China. China's one-child policy has kind of peaked, and now it's on the backward side, where China's looking and saying we're going to have a rapidly shrinking population after decades of rapidly increasing, and that causes all kinds of new dynamics. Lack of cheap labor means labor becomes dear, which drives up prices. So again, that's the third piece that we're looking at and saying it's inflationary. And the fourth piece, this may come as a surprise to some of you, but our politicians have not managed our finances very well. So raise your hand if that's a surprise. And so this is now the issue that we've known. It's been a kind of a slow-moving challenge that we've seen. We keep borrowing more money. The more money we borrow, the more interest we have to pay on that debt. As inflation kicked in after COVID, it's pushed up interest rates, which now is pushing up the cost of servicing our debt. Today we pay about 14 cents, 15 cents of every dollar that we pay in taxes for interest payments. Okay? We've been at that level before. It was back in the 1990s. And it was a time where we actually had some challenges, and the bond market kind of attacked the government. There was a term back then called bond vigilantes. They came in and said, you're not being responsible, therefore we're going to demand higher interest rates. And the government had to respond because they could see this challenge ramping up and ramping up. We're at that point again. We're over that 14% kind of Maginot line. It's really now catching a lot of attention. And we're starting to see some challenges out there. We had a 30-year bond auction rate, 30-year bond auction a few weeks back, and it didn't go very well. It didn't go very well because not a lot of people stepped up and said, I want those bonds at that rate. So interest rates had to push up. And we think that's going to continue to be a challenge because, again, axis of evil. Folks who used to buy a lot of our bonds, it used to be the biggest owner of, the second biggest owner of bonds, treasury bonds, was the Chinese government. They brought their owning of treasuries, they've about cut it in half over the last 7-8 years. So there's fewer buyers of bonds out there, which means you have to start paying higher premiums. Higher premiums is going to mean we're paying more of our tax dollars to service that debt. So we have some real challenges out there from how the federal government has spent for decades. It's now starting to come to roost. So all four of those items mean inflation is going to be a more prevalent challenge for the Federal Reserve over the next decade. Doesn't mean 9%, but it means it's going to be harder and harder for the government to get it down to 2%. In fact, today we got a key metric, it's called PCE, price core, it's the government's favorite, it's like CPI, but it's the government's favorite metric. And it started going back up again. So again, there's still pressures out there. Sir, you had a question?
Yeah. I think there's a fifth.
Oh, there's a fifth. I only have 4 fingers. I'm not using my thumb. Okay.
And I think that fifth element is the uncertainty issue. It is going to have a massive impact.
So if you didn't hear Ron's comments, it's climate change and the uncertainty around that. And it already has had an impact. If you have a house at the beach, check your insurance bill, okay? I can tell you it's been a consideration in the bond market, the municipal bond market, for probably 15 years. If you have, you're trying to build, municipalities are trying to build on a coastal region, you're probably paying about a 10% premium of somebody who's up in the mountains. And that's only going to continue to add additional costs in there. So that's a great point, Ron. Definitely something else to consider. So again, I'm gonna pass it over to Keith. Think about these big things. If you're running a business today, what you experienced kind of up until this point was one where you had low interest rates and low inflation, and any time that the economy got weak, the Federal Reserve would step in and save the day. The Federal Reserve is pinched today, okay? If the economy slows, what do? They cut interest rates. You cut interest rates, it stimulates the economy, which pushes up prices, right? And inflation comes back. So they're struggling a little bit right now to fight this battle. We believe they're convicted and are going to push inflation down, and possibly at the cost of creating a recession. Personally, I tell my kids all the time, you're going to learn more from your scars than your smiles. Economically, we have recessions about every 5 to 6 years. We had one, does anyone remember the last one that we had? Technically 2020. It was the second, third quarter of 2020, which was the heat of COVID. You don't remember it because you were trying to find toilet paper at the grocery store, okay? Recessions matter if they cause pain, and nobody really captured or realized pain. So you have to go all the way back to 2008-9, the Great Recession. So we're kind of overdue for a recession, and we think there's going to be some challenges out there that can pull us into a recession. Don't want to be too doom and gloomy. We don't think it'll be bad because demand for labor is so strong, but expect some slowdown coming. And with that, Keith, I'll pass it to you.
I'm going to go with this, Mike. I have slides, so I'm going to continue on the theme of doom and gloom, but with slides.
Can you hear? Is that on? Is the speaker?
Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue on the theme of doom and gloom, but with slides, and I'm going to zoom in. We're going to pull it down from sort of the national and international economy and focus on the Washington region. Actually, raise the hands. How many people? I assume you're all, or most of you, are from here. Is that? Raise your hand if you're from here. Do business here. Okay. Great. I was wondering how relevant this was going to be. And also, by the way, they still allow insurance in Florida?
They do.
That was the best. Anyway, here we go. So what I'm going to talk about, and does this? I'm going to talk about the DC area's economy, and this slide captures where we are at the CRA and the Steve Fuller Institute. This is kind of where we're at broadly with the DC region's economy. We're not doing well, and we haven't been doing well for 10 years. So from 2001 to 2005, we were outperforming the national economy by about 2 percentage points. So we were our GRP, our gross regional product, was growing faster than the nation by 2 whole percentage points over that period. We were basically double over the next 5 years, so from 2006 to 2010. Unfortunately, that actually is somewhat even too rosy. It probably had started to slow down about that time. The reason that it's double percentage points is the rest of the U.S. during that 08 recession that Bill was talking about, the rest of the economy tanked a lot harder than the DC region because we're underpinned by the federal government. We didn't shrink as bad. So this even makes us look better back in that 06 to 10 period. Then, and so we're going to come back to this point, I assume a lot of you remember the Budget Control Act and sequester at the beginning of the last decade. That essentially put in motion a decade of underperformance in the DC area. And we'll parse that a little bit. But basically starting in 2010, the DC economy was growing at half the rate average over the 5-year period from 2011 to 2015, and then we're barely, we're still growing slower than the nation as a whole between 2015 and present day. But again, some of that is because the U.S. kind of tanked a little bit worse than we did at the outset of the pandemic. But, and this is the kicker, we don't have 2022 gross regional product yet. Those numbers are not going to look good. The rest of the country's been growing faster than the DC region. So basically, the upshot is we've been growing slower for 10 years. We're not as good here as we think we are. One of the most jarring places that we see that, and it shows up immediately at the outset of the Budget Control Act and sequester, is out-migration. If you guys can't read the tiny little numbers, it doesn't really much matter. Focus on the yellow bars. So that's domestic migration. We're going to look at domestic migration for the sole purpose of domestic migrants are going to be more sensitive to relative economic opportunity. So we were adding about 26,000 or 25,000 net domestic migrants pre-Budget Control Act. Then we had the Budget Control Act and the sequester, and immediately we saw net domestic migration stop coming in. It basically stalled out. And then we were averaging somewhere between 25 and 30 net domestic out-migration per year. So we had 25,000 to 30,000 people leaving the region because they deemed it better to live somewhere else. Okay? We were bumbling along at a pretty unhealthy number of 25 to 30,000, and then COVID hit and the wheels fell off. And between 2020 and 2021, we lost, 46,000 net domestic migrants, and then it really accelerated between 2021 and 2022. So we've had to 66,000. So we've really had a massive amount of net domestic out-migration, basically since pandemic. The one thing that was kind of hiding this fact up until 2019 was the fact that we had quite a bit of international migration. So it still felt lively, people were still coming to the region, but this was all people coming to the U.S. from elsewhere. But as the previous administration started to tighten the number of people that were allowed to come in the country, we started to shrink actually. So the region did shrink, the population shrank between 19 and 20, and again between 2020 and 2021. We're not doing as well as we think we have been. Net domestic or net international migration ticked back up, so it's again hiding the fact that we're having massive amounts of domestic out-migration. We're just not as competitive as a lot of our peers around the country. And I'm going to point to one thing a little later on. It's housing. We'll get back to that. Or shelter, as they call it in the CPI. All right, we're going to take this number apart a little bit. Yeah.
But there's so much housing being built. So are the developers or the finances of the developers simply not talking to you? Is this like housing being built all over the region for a population?
So that's actually problematic because, if you go to the Fuller Institute, a lot is being built, yes. However, it's not enough for the population that's here, okay? And I'll come back to that at the very end of this. We'll see how fast I can talk. We're not building fast enough, and the big problem is existing supply. Massive under supply of existing homes. And it's going to get worse because I assume a lot of you refinanced your mortgage and you're now trapped in your house because how much am I going to pay on a mortgage at 7% as opposed to 3% or whatever you have? Over the last year and a half, that mortgage payment has gone through the roof. Nobody's leaving their house. If they're taking a new job in the DC region, supply is going to stay low. We're not building enough. I'll come back to that. That's the upshot, essentially. I'm going to take this number apart. So this is annual jobs. This is the CES data. The most recent number, I'm kind of interested to see if that gets revised down. I'm not actually convinced about it, and I'll show you why in a minute. But what I want to say is that, so we were ticking up. Things were really good for a really long time. Basically in the DC region, our economy contracted in 2013 a little bit, like we had a technical recession because of the Budget Control Act, and Uncle Sam stopped spending money, he stopped, buying from federal contractors, which I'm assuming some of you remember. But then, job growth was pretty strong between 2014 and 2020. Then obviously the wheels fell off, all the bartenders got laid off because nobody was going to the bars anymore, we were too freaked out. That number looks like, if you look at that line, it looks pretty good. And actually, like we're essentially back to where we were pre-pandemic. If you look at other metros around the country, if you look at Dallas, if you look at Miami, if you look at Phoenix, they were back like late 2020, mid 2021, and they're 500,000 jobs up to where they were pre-pandemic. We've basically been like bumbling along at like last place for the last 3 years. So those GDP numbers aren't going to look good when I read them. The only thing I want to say here on this slide is that it is interesting, though, that the structure of our economy has changed dramatically over the last 3 years. Okay, so you may or may not be able to read the numbers in the little red boxes, but that's where we are compared to where we were pre-pandemic, so February 2020. If you look at leisure and hospitality, we're down. Not much. It's not terrible right now. It's 2,400 jobs. But if you look at that professional and business service sector number, we're up 28,000 jobs. So basically what happened, everybody who was working at a restaurant, no longer working at a restaurant, and then you found a job that you could zoom to you could zoom from home, right? And so we had this massive switch. If you look at these numbers nationally, and feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me, if you look at these numbers nationally, there's a massive switch towards wholesale trade and transportation and utility. Basically, we needed to fill warehouses because everybody's sitting at home buying stuff on Amazon, and so those Amazon drivers are everywhere, right? So everybody left the restaurants and went home, and then there's just now Amazon drivers all over the place, right? So we've undergone a structural change in the DC region. The one thing I want to say about federal government is it's been a drag now for a year, which is problematic for a number of reasons. We're still kind of parsing out why this is the case. Some of this might be where the job is counted. This is something that us as regional guys got to worry about. Is technically these folks are counted at place of basically where they're supposed to be working. These federal workers aren't going into the office, so what are we counting? So this is something that we're still kind of trying to figure out as of late. But the current story that we have right now is basically federal agencies are having a really hard time replacing workers. And when they are able to replace workers, they're not replacing them here. Or they're giving them such hybrid flexibility that they're not living here. So, even if we were growing our federal workforce, it's not helping our economy because they're not going out to lunch, they're not, going to the grocery store, all this other kind of stuff. So this has been a drag, but we've actually been starting to wonder, how much does this even mean anymore just because people are untethered. This is the most problematic thing that we're watching at the moment. This is professional and business services sector. This is the bread and butter of our region's economy. This is what most people here who are supporting the ridiculously high housing costs are doing. These are architects, lawyers, engineers. Pandemic, we lost a bunch of jobs. I'm going to split it apart in a second, but then, basically, there's some base effects in this, but basically once a vaccine showed up, we started hiring a bunch of professional and business people, professional and business services people, lawyers, architects, and engineers, right? All right, it has started to slow down at the end of 2022, right? So basically this is when the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates, and maybe a dual earner household income in this category, husband and wife making $120,000, $150,000 a year each, whatever. Maybe you could afford $1 million home at a 3% mortgage, not at 7%, right? And with daycare and all these other things, so professional and business services sector in the region has essentially stalled. And what's concerning to us is that it is not just, so we're going to take that same number, we've now split it apart, the green numbers, that's actually professional, scientific, and technical. That's actually the lawyers, architects, and engineers. The orange numbers, those are waste management services and people sitting at the front desk. So what happened at the outset of the pandemic is if you were supporting the office, if your job was tied to the physical presence of being in the office, you got laid off, and you're probably financially scarred for life. The people who could work from home went and worked from home. Those are the green bars. Okay, and we basically stopped hiring in the region for about a year, and then we've ramped up and started hiring a boatload of lawyers, architects, and engineers, right? That number has stalled out starting in 2020. This is the bread and butter of our economy, and this is something that concerns us, is if this is what we do and we're not hiring anymore, we're not growing anymore. This is something for the next, somebody here is talking, I think, in a later panel on cybersecurity. Actually, this is showing up in cybersecurity as well. This is occupational code, so it's a little bit different from the last data, but basically the upshot is for the past 8 years we had been adding cybersecurity jobs, and at the outset of the pandemic, these folks were like, I can do this anywhere, I don't need to be here, so they left. And we're not even as good at things that we think we're good at. So the region's economy is facing some pretty strong headwinds. This is one, so I've already cited high interest rates. This is the other interesting issue. When I was talking to Bill on a Zoom on Wednesday, I don't even know what day it is anymore, we talked Wednesday morning, and we made a joke about we're not sure we're going to have a budget by November, let alone a speaker, or I'm sorry, we're not going to have a budget, let alone a speaker. Like 4 hours later, it just picks up. I was watching it live and I was just like, we got that wrong.
Who's that guy?
Right, yeah, exactly. Quick Google it. Anyway, the upshot with this chart is this is federal spending, federal procurement spending in the Washington region. This is how much Uncle Sam spends to procure services from private sector contractors, which I suspect a lot of the folks in this room do. Okay? Problematically, we have a split, administration right now. We have a Republican House, we have Democrat, sort of everything else, ignoring the Supreme Court, whatever. What happens with majorities, it doesn't matter who's the majority, if it's Democrat or Republican, we're going to spend a boatload of money because we're going to spend it on what we care about. You can look at the DeBarge from 2016 to 2020, we can see this nationally, spent a boatload of money between 2016 and 2020. Now that it's split, we care about spending extra, which is actually probably, for the region, it's probably unfortunately a bad thing because of what Bill had mentioned with now that we have to pay interest on all this debt, this could spiral. But the upshot is we're not looking at a period of growth like we saw between 16 and 20. We're probably looking at a period over the next at least couple of years of something that'll look a lot more like 2011 to 2013, and that was declining federal spending in the region. So the dollars aren't just going to be continuing to flow. We'll probably kind of stick around with where we're at, but we'll probably 1%, growth rate or whatever the number that he's been, kicked around. This is a lot of what those professional and business service sector folks are doing, and this is this is another reason why those bars stopped growing. Right? We're not adding jobs because Uncle Sam stopped spending money. In addition to what Bill talked about with the labor force being obscenely tight, that's true here. I won't really harp on that fact. It's just really hard to find workers. Some of it's, aging workforce type of thing. But that's really, really true here. It's quite interesting that suburban Maryland has the lowest unemployment rate, which is historically not true. Normally it's Nova. Anyway, this is an interesting aside. We're middle of the pack in terms of job growth from September 2022 to September 2023. Out of the 15 largest job markets, we've been like second or third for the past like 3 years. So the fact, I think it's actually a blip. I actually think it's wrong. We'll see what happens when they revise this number, but I actually think we're going to go back down. We've basically been like last for 3 years, right? And so I'm actually thinking like this is going to get revised down. But if the best we do is middle of the pack with like an accidental like statistical error, like we're really not doing good. All right, and this is okay.
So the $64,000 question for both of you is, if we are to believe, what you're saying, then at some point we should see it reflected in the market. What's going on there?
Stock market?
Stock market.
Yeah, which market?
Stock market.
Can we come
Keep
back
going.
to that? Let me finish up and
Keep
then, because I'm almost done. I need like 2 minutes. And I have one place where it does show up. And that's in the housing market. So this goes back to, I'm sorry I forgot your name in the back. Larry. This goes back to your point, Larry. So look at that that black line. You might not be able to read the numbers. I mean, it's actually a really dark green line. But so look at the line. We had about 40,000 housing units in the region, existing housing units in the region for sale back in 2015. It's about 15,000. This is like what you can get on Zillow. And actually that number is even too high because this includes all pending. So this is stuff that's like kind of under contract type of stuff. So this is actually even higher than it should be. There is nothing to buy in the DC region, so it doesn't matter how much we build. Their existing supply has come down so much, even with population growth, predominantly from international in-migration, that what happens when you keep demand relatively constant and you decrease supply, we're going to skip so this existing home sales. Basically, this is saying that demand has been relatively constant. We're not building enough. If you population adjust building permits, it's still not enough. We're basically building what we were in 2012, even though we've added so many people. We're not building enough. But anyway, what happens when you reduce supply and keep demand constant? Prices have soared in the region. Obviously, this happened everywhere, but it was growing faster here than it was, basically before the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to zero. And this is all housing units. This includes townhomes, condos. The average home sales price was $266,000. The growth has stopped in home sales price. So at least for our region, this is one market that this has shown up in. Is your housing value has basically stopped because we can't grow it anymore. Jobs aren't supporting prices, and that mortgage rate has just gotten too high. There is one recent it had been tanking. The last few months it started to grow a little bit, but I'm not going to go into details of it. This is a little bit skewed, but housing prices have basically softened. That's the upshot of this. And so with that, I'll actually.
Yeah, let me throw a couple comments on top of this. Life before COVID was essentially an economically calm pond. Okay, COVID was a massive rock that was thrown in the middle of that pond. And we've been dealing with these waves coming out of that pond for quite some time. It's truly been amazing what's happened. The fact that we're dealing with economic oddities and weirdness today should not come as a surprise, because we dumped, between the Federal Reserve and the federal government, about $11 trillion of cash on the economy overnight. It was sudden, it was abrupt, it was indiscriminate, but it happened. Well, I've been asked many times, did the Fed and Congress screw up? And I liken it to this way. It's easy to throw shade on them looking back, but my analogy is, imagine your house catches on fire. You have two choices. I can let it burn to the ground, or I can put it out. And everybody's gonna say, I'm calling the fire department, I wanna put it out. So you call the fire department, they come out and put the fire out. 2 days later, the insurance adjuster, assuming you can get insurance, shows up and says, well, I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is the fire damage was about $10,000. The bad news is the water damage was $500,000, and you're gonna be dealing with that for months and years to go. That's what was happening. Our economy was on fire, and our elected officials and the Fed stepped in and said, we just gotta put the fire out, we'll deal with the problems down the road. That showed up in inflation, that was responded to a rapid increase in interest rates, that reflects on, crazy house price issues, that, and so we're dealing with all of these issues. The further we get from that rock being tossed into the pond, the less and less those waves will be. So I want to be optimistic here is that these issues are working themselves through the system, right? Domestically here in the region, we have some challenges, but we're gonna figure that out. Unemployment, one of the things that we're seeing today is kind of dual level unemployment. If you are blue collar, if you are moderately trained, you are not having a problem finding jobs, right? There's still big demand for workers in that area. You saw it, if you wear a white collar to work, right, and you work in an office building, that's where we're seeing layoffs come, right? Technology is starting to replace some of those folks, right? There's a new challenge there. And so we're seeing some creative destruction happen there, but things have happened so rapidly and so dramatically. That's what we're really struggling with today. So it's not surprising that we're dealing with issues here locally.
I would also say that I've heard this, economists, this has been like the most well-publicized recession. People like economists have been saying recession for like a year now. Being like, oh, we're gonna get a recession every day, including like us. We continue to believe that we're gonna get a slowdown. So to your point directly, you're like, when is it going to show up in the market? I'm not gonna comment on when it will show up in the stock market because I am certainly not qualified to do that. But as far as, kind of what we're concerned about, we do think it will, we already believe that it is showing up as of late. If those companies that were built on cheap loans have to start paying back loans at higher, interest rates, and you can't hire new workers, it starts to, basically pull them in. We think we see it here already. Will the Fed engineer a soft landing? We still think no. Opinions vary, but when that happens, historically it's been 18 to 24 months since they started raising interest rates. We're basically at 18 months now.
So
we're only there at
It sounds like we should listen to our politicians, but we should really listen to Jerome Powell.
Yeah. So
he's the man.
Yeah. So Ron asked the question, why are we not seeing this show up in the stock market? Clearly, he's a man who follows his own bank account and has a self-interest, like we all do. Ron, I would say we actually did have it did show up. If you look at this year and break it down, the first 3 months the stock market was trading down. Something happened in March that changed the stock market's trajectory. And it was the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, which failed in 12 hours because the Federal Reserve had ratcheted up interest rates, and when that happened, their bond portfolio fell dramatically, and boom, they went out of business. So why is a bad thing? I'm trying my best. Why is a bad thing good for the stock market? Because what happened during that period, the Federal Reserve said, we got to push cash out there to keep banks from failing. All that cash was good for companies, especially high-tech companies, okay? And it changed itself. They started reversing back to trying to slow the economy again over the summer, and since then the stock market's been trading off because the fear factor is coming there, And the belief is that the Fed is in a position saying we would rather have a recession than have inflation run away again. And recessions tend to be bad for stocks. So that's why. Yeah, there's going to be, I started by saying it's no longer good versus bad. It's going to be a discussion of easy versus hard. We believe the last decade, we're going to look back and say, man, that was easy. We think the next decade it's going to be hard. Doesn't mean it's going to be bad. It's just going to be more volatile and harder to find clear paths and clear opportunities.
I am certainly not qualified to comment on the stock market or any of this stuff, but the one thing that I will say is something that follows it reasonably closely and follows discussions around it, we do regional economics, is that, to Bill's point, the refrain over basically the first half of the year was good news is bad news is good news, because something would happen and then there would be this counter move away from it. It was just like, so there was always a reason why it wasn't happening. So. How are we doing on time? Questions?
Yeah, questions. Yeah, we got 10 minutes.
Keith, my question's for you. If things are so doom and gloom locally, what are 3 things you think the local politicians, corporations, whatever can do to improve these statistics?
One is housing costs. So we do, a lot of things are going up, but we do need to build more. It is an odd thing to think about. So this is my opinion. This is my version of it. Housing costs are too high. So, if you look, I get on Zillow all the time and look at houses that are way outside my price point, like completely unrealistic. I don't care. I think it's awesome. I'm just like, a house on the Chesapeake Bay? Sure, I don't care if it costs $10 million. Right? But then when you pull it back to like more realistic price range, I'm not moving out of my house because we actually do have a sub 3% mortgage rate. I'm not gonna even if I get a job in Baltimore, like I'm not moving out of my house. I'd rather commute than give that up, right? So I am locked in my house. So, unless we get the actual like level of prices down, which is new homes, which also for somebody who follows, somebody more qualified to comment on stocks, if you've been following, home builders have been on a tear the second half of the year because they're the only ones making money. So housing prices are one. The second thing, which we have no control over, and my sort of the namesake of the Stephen S. Fuller Institute was yelling about this for decades, about we need to diversify away from the federal government. We didn't do that. We're still not doing that. We need to diversify away from the federal government. It's, whether or not you're a federal employee or a federal contractor, that's still basically what we all do. And like, I'm not throwing stones, but if you're looking for growth for your business, it's probably not going to be in the federal, it's probably not going to be in the federal business for, that's going to be stagnant for the next few years. On the note of diversifying away from the federal government, those folks aren't going back into the office, okay? And that leads to basically the final 2 things that I'll say. We need to figure out Metro. You take out federal workforce, I think the statistic is they made up like 12% of riders, but it's not just federal workers. They also set the precedent for contractors, right? If 12% of your employee or your customer base disappears overnight, and then we'll call it another 12% after that, you're not going to be too thrilled. You're going to have massive problems with Metro, and this is what we have. We have massive problems with Metro. I'll get to you in a second. So we need to figure out a more stable funding source for Metro, because the DC region, one of our core strengths is Metro. We had a forum a week ago where actually somebody from a couple folks from around the region. This is something that we need to deal with. The last little bit is basically figuring out what to do with office buildings. And I bring those up because office buildings and Metro have the same problem. And this is a 5-point problem. They basically, what happened is, office workers stopped going into the office Monday and Friday. That's 40% reduction in sort of utilization of capital, right? You just lost 2 days a week because nobody wants to go in on Mondays and Fridays. That's when I go in because there's no traffic and nobody's in the office because I'm a nerd and don't like seeing people, right? But then it devalues some of our biggest assets, office buildings and metro. And so, you know, if we get people, I'm not going to say necessarily we need to get people back into the office, but we need to think about what to do with this.
Get back here.
You know, there are several things that happen or actually have an impact in the local areas in terms of number of employments as well. What we're seeing, you know, I do business with the federal government, is that they are allowing more and more off-site remote employees supporting the federal government. I'm not sure about the fact that the federal government's requirement is going to decrease because of the fact that, one, you have a decrease in government employees due to retirement or nutrition. They still have things that they have to do in terms of, meeting their agency mission. So I think that you're going to see an increase in the number of contracts or requirements coming out of the federal government to offset the number of government employees leaving. On the DoD side, because of what's going on around the world, there's going to be an increase in the DoD spending and support. So, so there's a conflicting components to everything that we're seeing that we haven't seen before because of COVID.
If you know what the new Speaker of the House is going to do regarding budgets, I think everybody in this room would like to know that. I hope that's true.
I am just, looking at what's going to happen based on what's going on, all the activities going on in the world today, all the conflicts that's going on. I just don't see the federal government's requirements slowing down.
So, general comment, economics are based on how we collectively act and spend our dollars. Today, we have a lot of flexibility and a lot of demand for ourselves. Again, what does a recession do? It kind of shocks the system back to say, you now need to work differently and work harder. So a recession could actually be positive for the region to say, okay, maybe that remote work model, if I want to keep my job, I better start coming in, right? So you could start to see some changes.
I agree. We need to bring people back in the workforce, but we are also dealing with the culture of today's generation as well. So.
Darn kids. Tell my kids. Yes, sir.
Hi, I know the importance of regional economics and us responding to these challenges as a region, but how do the three jurisdictions stack up?
Northern Virginia is winning.
I mean, we all know intuitively Northern Virginia is winning, but when we see these numbers that are doom and gloom, like, is Virginia a bright spot and DC and Maryland are actually pulling us down, or is Virginia just slightly bad and it's even worse?
The easiest thing for me to do, and I'm sorry, the easiest thing for me to do is to write articles about the region and point out that Virginia is doing better than Maryland and DC. It doesn't pick a topic, any topic. Northern Virginia is doing better. The only reason that first job number that I showed you, the only reason that is back to, call it pre-COVID, is because Northern Virginia is well above and DC and Maryland are well below. My take on it is there's some economic malaise in Maryland, and DC is kind of, I have a little more sympathy towards DC because so much of their economy was built on leisure and hospitality. And when you wipe out that massive sector and people aren't going back into the office, it doesn't pop back. So Northern Virginia's.
So had the chance to hear a fellow yesterday from DC Development Corporation. I think I have the name wrong, but you get the idea. one of the things he said that stuck with me is think about what Northern Virginia is and how it's different than other areas. It has been a collector of international and national companies to our area. It hasn't done a great job of organically building a lot, right? So a lot of these firms are, Audi or somebody like that. As they start to rethink, is this a good place for my headquarters, they have much greater flexibility to say, no, it's not, right? So it has done really well, but it also has a different level of exposure as we start to look forward, that maybe some of those companies that help build it up, they can also turn because of housing, because of transportation costs, because of some of these challenges. So it's, it could have, its success could be a challenge for it going forward.
I know our time is up, and thank you, Bill and Keith. And if you have any more questions, they are the go-to person to talk to.
We also have nowhere to go.
Thank you.